On this episode of Money and Power on the Infinity Podcast Network, MASH deep dives, bad comics, and Excelsior. But first, Kid Ink.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough what it's you on. Yeah. Really ain't nothing I can drop that. Wake up in the morning, make it all okay. It's nothing to get it poppin'.
Welcome to episode 31 of Money and Power, our weekly look at questions related to finance, politics, and culture. I am your host, Nathan Martin, and joining me from Michigan, a financial consultant and host of the Rob Talks Money and Apologetics 105 podcast, also on the Infinity Podcast Network, Rob Johnson.
If our titles get any longer,
I know, right?
I stumble more and more on that intro.
Yeah. You're not allowed to add any more podcasts.
Yeah, we're all done.
Yes, you're capped at 2, because obviously I can't handle more than that. How are you doing, Rob?
Good. Good.
And joining me in... you just ruined it all. And joining me in studio here in the crown jewel of rural Ohio, our comic relief, Jeremiah Martin.
Present and accounted for.
And together we, of course, are the trio of talk, the triad of the tittle-tattle, and the triumvirate of the tete-a-tete. And we are here to bring you a awesome show and hopefully make you bring the LOLs, as the kids say. I don't know if the kids actually say that, but...
they don't. They really don't.
No. Jeremiah, so how was your week?
My week was pretty awesome, and specifically today, got to meet Ben Shapiro. Got a picture with him, so that was pretty awesome. I'll actually talk a little bit more about that in my news bit, but yeah, this is a pretty nice cap to my week so far.
Oh, that's what we call in the business a tease. So in case you were thinking of checking out before news bits, don't do that. All right, Rob, how was your week?
Good. I met Ben Schultz. He's actually the janitor at my company. Good dude.
Nice.
He didn't want to take a photo.
Well, you can't
he's
win
a bit
them all.
He's a bit skittish.
So far, since we started this podcast, Jeremiah has met Ben Shapiro, and he has met Eric Metaxas. So
Yeah, that was within the last 3-4 weeks.
And he put up his Christmas tree. So I'm taking credit for all that. Good job. Thank you, listeners.
Yep. For those who watched the live video, they were able to see my Christmas suit as well. So yeah, I'm just rolling deep in every possible way.
Yes, and we put a clip of that I saw on our Twitter feed.
That's right.
Specifically. So if you are so inclined, you can go to Money Power Pod on all of our socials, and you'll be able to see that lovely clip of Jeremiah proving that, you know what, Christmas actually starts after the election.
That's right. I stand by it.
The look on Rob's face.
I know. I can't even see him, but I can audibly hear his eyes rolling.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
They're just clicking as they go click 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 in the back of his head.
I'm just so disappointed in the suit. It's a waste of money.
You say waste of money, Rob. I say investment in awesomeness.
Okay.
What if I told you that I purchased the suit for $30 and I can turn around and flip the suit into unlimited amounts of happiness, joy, and overall cheer?
What if I told you happiness, joy, and cheer doesn't pay the bills?
Oh my gosh! So the deep cut on that, of course, is that Rob on Rob Talks Money is doing a flip challenge, right, Rob? And
Yep.
So you
Killing it.
You started out with $20, right?
Yep.
And your goal was to turn that $20 into $500.
Yeah. Yep.
Is
So
there-
just take the $20 through dirt auctions, garage sales, and estate sales. Buy stuff for no more than $20 total. Turn it. Use the profit to do it all over again until you hit 500.
Nice. And
Okay, so I was actually going to ask this because I've been following along and it's been really interesting. But so you're not stuck to that initial $20 spend, but once you flip, let's say you use that $20 and you flip that and you make $150, then you can use that $150 to buy more stuff. Is what you're saying?
Yep.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. So when you were first announcing it and encouraging listeners and followers on social media to join you, my wife said to me, "Hey, we should do this. This looks fun." And I said, "What that really means is you think that I should do this because you think it would be fun to watch me do this." And she was like, "Yeah, pretty much." So I was like, ain't nobody got time for that. So more power to you. I love it. I love watching. But
Yeah. We have like a little challenge at work because everyone that I work with has, anytime they need something tech related, they come to me and I get it for them for half off. Right. So we have these little goals. Like if I can, hit like $1,000 a month in net profit for flips, then they're more happy for me. I don't really get nothing for it except for the money. So, but so far to that $20, I'm up to like I think 130. So, it's going good.
So in every military unit, there's that one guy that can just get you whatever you need, right? And you're basically that guy.
I'm the Red of the Shawshank Redemption.
Gotcha. And wasn't there a character on MASH that did that too? Who's the character in MASH that everyone went to for like stuff?
Well, there was only one episode of MASH where there was someone who did that, and it was called Souvenirs, and it was in season 5. And in that particular episode, this guy was hiring children to go get souvenirs to sell, and the children were dying. So.
Well, that took a dark turn. Thank you for
Wow.
that. All right. Well, and now it is time for our look back at the weird, the inane, and the general happenings going on in the world by the crazy people who happen to live here. And news bits.
News bits. Show me your bits of news.
Just don't sell them on the black market. All right.
Hold on. You know how impressed you are with me with that season recall for MASH.
I mean, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you want to do deep dives into Full House and Growing Pains or Family Matters or Step by Step. I'm your man. MASH, we go to you. But whatever. It is what it is. We all have our niche when it comes to TV.
See,
Jeremiah's the Seventh Heaven.
Oh.
right.
And the 700 Club.
So Circle Square, wasn't that the thing?
Pat Robertson.
So when you were doing the whole bit with MASH just now, I assumed that there was going to be a twist at the end, but I assumed it was going to be like, and then like you're just kidding and you're just making it all up and just being like really super specific, but it was all made up. Little did I know that the twist would be child trafficking and basically internment camps for children. That's I didn't see it taking that turn. So, but it took a turn nonetheless.
Actually, Jeremiah's would be The Office and Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Didn't you played HQ the other day? They had the Office thing. You won, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
You won HQ Trivia?
Yep. I'm pretty sure I won 33 cents or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Good
yeah.
work.
Yeah. So you're not over. So you don't have to say like, oh, between Emily and I.
Yeah, that's true.
Emily's won twice.
Well, and that's the thing. There was one question that Emily wasn't sure on. She didn't trust me, and she went with her gut, and she was wrong. So she had to use a. No, she didn't have an extra life. But anyway, so she did not win that time, and I won. So we both have one win between us over the past 8 months.
No, 2. She has 2.
Oh yeah,
She won the like $2 and something, didn't she? And then she also won
that's
like
right.
the 26 cents or whatever.
yeah.
So she still has better than you.
And that's that's a deep cut in the podcast too, because I remember we talked about HQ trivia, like one of our first couple episodes. So
We did, and nobody joined under me. I gave out my referral code. Nobody joined, but that was back when we had like 3 listeners, and 2 of them were our parents.
yeah, so we've since lost our parents and
This is
added a couple more people. I think.
Although Dad did give us a review. There's that.
That is true.
And left me out of it conveniently.
It actually was really terrifying because he was like, "Now I know how now I know how my sons really feel," and I was like, it was almost like cryptic.
Yeah.
I would have really, if it was my mom saying that, I would have been like, "Oh my gosh, what did we say? This is going to be an awkward Thanksgiving."
What were we talking about the other day about having like a secret podcast that like somehow magically only got sent to my
Yes.
dad?
So we were
and
like, it would be the best. It would be the best prank ever if we could somehow figure out how to get an episode just downloaded just to my dad's phone.
Just
So
do
my dad would
do a private RSS feed and send it to him, and
so-
he'll open it as Catcher app.
So then my dad would be listening to it and just like have a bunch of just like F this and like whatever, like just like stuff, and oh, I'm drinking my cigar and gambling all at the same time.
Charlottesville
And-
wasn't so bad.
Here's where you can get your discount Tiki Chorch.
oh wow, I'm sorry, that caught me off guard.
MAP for 10% off, baby.
Yeah. Go to MAP for 50% off your Tiki Torch. At Bob's Tiki Torch Hut.
So
No,
so we might
that'd be
do
great.
that. We might do that. And so if anyone wants to have that private RSS feed, hit us up. Maybe that'll be on our Patreon page or something
I tell you,
for subscribers.
there are a couple times where we've done like we're waiting on Rob or waiting on Jeremiah, and we're recording prior to that. Those would be worth the price of admission. There's a couple of those that are pretty funny. So, all right, Jeremiah, your news bit.
Oh, news bits. Yeah.
Yeah, since I introduced, we might actually have to run the jingle again. Hey, news bits.
Go ahead, Jeremiah.
All right,
Am I supposed to run the jingle?
yeah,
All right, here we go.
News
We're running
bits.
it all.
Show me your bits.
of news for real this time. All right, Jeremiah.
It'd been so long, I forgot what we were doing. So I mentioned earlier in the intro that I was able to meet Ben Shapiro today, and that was some fun. And so this news bit actually gives some context to how I was able to meet him. So this is coming straight from Rob's favorite news source, DailyWire.com. And it says the title is "Vital Bill Backing Free Speech on Campus Gets Support from Shapiro." So on Tuesday, which is today, the day of recording, Daily Wire editor-in-chief Ben Shapiro testified before the House Higher Education Committee at the Ohio State House in favor of a bill protecting free speech on public college and university campuses. In response to the common resistance conservative speakers are met with on college campuses, the bill would work to ensure free speech for varying political ideologies, including, yes, conservative voices. The Forum Act, which stands for the Forming Open and Robust University Minds, Forum, Act would ban limiting so-called free speech zones on campus and address often unfairly and strategically doled out obstacles for conservative speakers. So the organization that I work for, this is a bill that we've been backing for some time. It has went through several revisions, and it's been introduced in several legislative sessions. But it just so happened that today Ben Shapiro was speaking at Ohio State University in Columbus, and we worked it out so that we would have a hearing on this bill today, and we got in contact with his people, and he was more than willing to come out and testify on behalf of the bill, as well as we did a press conference. And so it was a really cool opportunity to get to hear from him. And we also heard from several other students about their issues on college campuses here in Ohio. With the key there is free speech zones, and it addresses often unfairly and strategically doled out obstacles for conservative speakers. So what college campuses will often do is they will have policies in place that are only ever really enforced when they want to enforce them. And when it is a speaker that they don't like, or they don't ideologically agree with, they will quote the policies, or they will, as it says, strategically put obstacles in place, and it becomes a big ordeal to ultimately, shut down speech that administrators on campus don't agree with or don't like. And so this bill would address that. And there was a lot of great testimony, including Ben Shapiro's, on why that's so needed, especially here in Ohio. So it was really interesting. I had a fun day, and it was great to be a part of the process.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Fun. Were there any protesters or anything?
No, not that we saw. There's a pretty. Yeah,
because he's speaking at OSU tonight, right?
Yeah,
I saw that, and I saw some protesters posting on Twitter on that one. So
yeah, so there was. He had mentioned today that there was some flyers going around from Antifa affiliated groups that said that they were going to disrupt, and I think it was 5 people showed up, so it wasn't a big deal. But yeah, there's going to be that. I saw a video of them holding some sort of flag. I couldn't read what it said, but they were yelling "F Shapiro, F Shapiro." So class acts.
Nice. Were they actually saying F, or were they saying the word?
Oh no, they were saying the full word. But this is not the private RSS feed, so we can't.
Fair. All Antifa's down in Florida voting right now, so that's what's going on there. They're in Georgia. It's a whole nother thing.
It's true.
All right. Awesome. Rob?
Yeah, so earlier today, news broke out of Seattle that Amazon has selected HQ2, and what they're going to be doing is they're going to be splitting the second headquarters between 2 cities. Offices will be located in Long Island City, a neighborhood of the Queensboro, and then Crystal City, a section of Arlington, Virginia, just outside D.C. So basically, Amazon is going to be locating to the second headquarters to New York City and Washington, D.C. In the beginning search for HQ2, 238 cities, made proposals to Amazon as to why they should make their headquarters there, and ultimately New York and Washington, D.C. won. Now, this was somewhat of a surprise to people because it's very corporate environments. It's not like it's not a town in West Virginia or Minneapolis, Minnesota, or something like that. It's very expected, I guess, for a corporation to set up shop there. And the main reason that I think they're doing this is because Seattle hasn't been very friendly towards business growth, and they haven't been very friendly towards Amazon, despite all of the revenue and good that Amazon has done for the city of Seattle. So the big story here for me is that politicians, of course, on the left, which is interesting, are split on this. The mayor of New York City thinks that this is going to be a very good thing for New York, obviously, since he's been doing a lot of the negotiations with Amazon. And then Congresswoman-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, apologies if I mixed up the name, is questioning whether or not this is going to be a good thing. And I think her main reason is because of the 25,000 employees that are looking to be docked in New York City. She's concerned about rent raising, which from recent news stories, I don't really know if she knows how much rent costs, but she apparently is concerned about Amazon coming and bringing billions of dollars of revenue to the city over years of time, which is quite funny. So it is interesting how one side of the left, in this case, absolutely gets the economics of this and why it's valuable to NYC, and one side is completely locked into a socialist dynamic and doesn't understand the benefit of this for New York. New York and DC should be rejoicing right now.
Yeah, amazing that a socialist doesn't understand basic economics.
Hot take.
Color me shocked.
Yeah.
Actually, funny thing is that also in the camp of saying that it might not be a good thing, Donald J. Trump. So there you go.
Yeah, and
bipartisanship on not understanding proper economics, but surprise, surprise, that a cronyist doesn't understand basic economics either.
Yeah.
No, I kid. But yeah, it's this was absolutely of no shock to me whatsoever that Washington D.C. Would be in the mix for any other reason than it's the seat of power. And why in the world would Amazon not put a major headquarters there and be able to force lobbying efforts and such? So,
one thing that came up with this that I wanted to contrast as well is I was listening to Shapiro, and I haven't listened to Shapiro's show in probably over a month just because it hasn't been refreshing on my feed. But I listened today, and he had said that he thinks that businesses, no matter what size, should be entitled to the same credits and exemptions and deductions and all that jazz. I think much like in business, like the bigger you are, the more value you bring to the table, the more that the city should deal with you. So I think New York, if they're giving hundreds of millions of dollars in tax credits to Amazon, but it's still going to net positive for the city, that's an overall good thing. And because Amazon is so big and because they bring so much, that's why they're getting the deductions and the credits. A small flower shop that sets up in New York doesn't bring a lot of face value off the get-go to be open to those same things. So it can't be the same across the board for all companies. So I disagree with Shapiro on that, but I thought it was interesting that they picked those two cities. I didn't think they were going to. I thought they were going to go very remote, low tax, maybe Tennessee, Texas, something like that. And Dallas was a contender. That was my pick, was Dallas. But yeah, it's interesting to see how it shook out.
Well, they put another thing they announced. I guess Nashville got a huge distribution center out of it.
Yeah.
If I saw that right. And
pop-up shops. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know. It wasn't too much of a shock to me. The split was kind of shocking, and I thought very telling because they said that either of those locations did not have the job market or employment market to actually be able to handle a singular headquarters. So it was split between the two, which I think that if they had gone to, like North Carolina or Tennessee, I think it would have been different. But I think it was more political than anything else.
Yeah. There's been some discussion online of whether like there was ever an intent to go anywhere else. That was the bidding war just all some sort of show. And I mean, what is their ultimate? What was the point in even doing all that and going through all that process if they're going to go to the places that even without a bidding war would have been, politically satisfactory?
Well, I had posted in the I had posted in the discussion group an article that kind of went through that they got a lot of basically corporate intelligence that they're going to be able to use essentially for free, that they didn't even have to pay for because they open it up everywhere in so many cities, pointed out. So whether it's knowing what new infrastructure packages are coming up, what kind of cronyism is available in certain areas, or etc. It was all gotten for free, something that they would have paid, millions upon millions of dollars to get outside of this competition. So I think that the article that I posted was a little cynical on that, and you of course can find that out in our Money and Power podcast group. It's moneypowerpod.com/group, and you can join that and see that article. I think it was going to be DC all along, period. And I think it was going to be DC from the get-go for the obvious political reasons of why in the world would you not go to the seat of power if you were choosing a second headquarters, for all the lobbying reasons that I had stated.
Yeah. I don't think it was predetermined from the beginning that it was going to be DC or New York, simply because it took over a year for them to decide. And they're not going to waste the time and the resources and the scouting talent that it takes to figure out what city they're going to land in. Because they also took 238 different bids from cities and had people negotiating in Dallas and Nashville. So I don't think it was predetermined. I think they were honestly looking for what's going to be the best tax break, who's going to bring the most benefit, and if New York and DC were willing to play, then that was probably the top of their list. But if they weren't, then I think Nashville and Dallas would have probably been next up.
And I think they just use those other towns as leverage.
For sure.
I don't think we're ever going to truly know the answer to that. But that's just my hot take.
Man, I'm still kind of stuck on the fact that Rob's okay with crony capitalism.
Wait, what?
Tax breaks for corporations.
Picking and choosing winners and corporate cronyism. I didn't realize that you were into all that.
Yeah. I guess if you want to call it that, I think it's more so of what's going to be the best value add for the city at that point in time. So it's very much case by case basis. So crony capitalism, no, but if it's going to be an overall value add for the city and it's contained within that local ecosystem, then by all means negotiate for what's best for the people. But a straight across the board policy for a 10-person flower shop versus a new $25,000 business ad, that the policies, in my opinion, at a local level don't need to be the same. They can be, but they don't need to be.
But I mean, wouldn't you rather create an atmosphere on a statewide or a citywide basis that encourages people to start businesses and to grow businesses and even to bring in their businesses as a whole, rather than just deciding we don't care about anyone unless you're Amazon?
No, I don't think it has to be one policy specifically for Amazon. I think there can be multiple policies, one that encourages the benefit of small business growth, one that encourages large corporations making deals for local economies. I don't think it has to be one policy for all companies. I think it can be multiple policies structured in different ways to benefit the level that which each company's at. Because a 10-person company is going to grow much differently than a company that's franchising out or building out another headquarters like Amazon. So by all means, encourage that small business growth. They ought to. It makes up over 50% of the economy nationwide. But they need to make sure that they're placating to all levels and doing what's best for the people in those local areas.
Well, and I don't disagree with you necessarily, but in this instance, that's exactly what is happening. Is that that state and city legislatures get together and decide what specific benefits can we do for this company to bring in this company. That's exactly what happens in these types of situations. And if that's not cronyism, I mean, I don't know what is. And then especially, Columbus was on the map, and Columbus also happens to be our state capital. And it's actually one of the only state capitals I remember from last week. But it also has political side effects. So if Columbus became that headquarters, then that also has future effects on the legislature, and then that creates that political pressure to, well, you got us to come in, but now you need to keep us here. And that's what we're seeing all over the country with different large corporations. Our friends on the left want to talk about, the poor getting poorer and the rich getting richer, but under this kind of cronyism, that's actually exactly what happens, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm not a fan.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, and honestly, it's not something that I'm a super big knowledge base on. It's just, for me, when we're talking about what's going to be best for overall, I would have to see why it would make poor people poorer if it's bringing higher level jobs to the community and it's boosting other economies apart from what Amazon does. Property rental.
And it's an age-old question of what level of government interference is acceptable.
Right.
And is it acceptable under any circumstances to use taxpayer money to pay a company to come to town, even though it is going to ostensibly benefit the citizens? And to me, so that I think that's where there's a difference between tax breaks and tax credits. I'm okay with tax breaks. We do it in our local area, but giving tax credits to where you're actually paying is a little bit different. And so to bring it in perspective, a couple reasons why I thought that it was always going to Washington, D.C. First of all, Bezos already owns the largest mansion in D.C. He also owns the Washington Post, and AWS is already has about 34% of the nation's cloud computing market and is based in Northern Virginia already. They already have the $600 million deal with the Central Intelligence Agency, and they are trying to get the Department of Defense's $10 billion with a B winner-take-all cloud services contract. So, so the question becomes: did DC actually need to spend all that money, quote unquote, in tax credits to actually get Amazon to come there? And I don't think they did. But I think that Amazon was very smart in making this a nationwide competition to leverage them to get them. Because if you're looking at, a $10 billion deal for your AWS, I mean, do you need any of the other tax credits? Or is that good enough reason to be located there?
Yeah, I'd have to know more about that particular deal. So we do a lot of cloud computing, cloud storage, and I've had to meet with a lot of cloud vendors, and AWS is one of them. I honestly don't think that there's another cloud computing service in the country that can compete with AWS. So I don't know if that was much of a factor. I would almost guarantee they're getting that contract.
Yeah, that's fair. So, anyways, it's a
good discussion. I think we should talk more about that for sure.
I definitely think we need to put it on the docket because at what point does capitalism cease becoming capitalism and starts becoming cronyism?
It's a fair point.
And my overall thoughts, so my brief 5-second thought on this is I'm very leery of government ever imposing and injecting itself in the marketplace. I understand why it's done on an economic development standpoint, and all cities do it. But at some level, there comes a point where smaller cities and smaller municipalities aren't able to compete with the cronyism that's happening in their neighboring communities. And I know that we face that in our local community. We're a local community of 9,000. I think we have a lot to offer as far as the actual marketplace base. But we have a town near us that basically makes a lot of financial decisions based off of paying companies to come to their area. And so they do come to that area. They get the tax base. We're kind of out in the cold. And a lot of that has to do with the local taxation. So I think it'll be good to talk about that. Economic development wise, how can you do economic development conservatively? I think that's an excellent discussion to have.
For sure.
Yeah. Sounds like a good planned topic.
All right. Let's put it on the docket. All right. Outstanding. All right. So my news bit is going to be a segue.
Wait, we're still in news bits?
We are still in news bits.
Do we need to play the jingle again?
No, we don't. Not a third time. Third time's the charm. No. So my news bit's really just a segue into our main topic this evening. So we had the midterm elections, as everyone's well aware, and we did, I think, a really good Facebook Live kind of recapping all that. But prior to the elections, Pete Davidson from Saturday Night Live kind of got in some hot water because of his statements about Lieutenant Commander Dan Crenshaw, who was running for Congress in Texas. And we're first going to play the clip that he got in hot water over.
Oh, so we're playing that clip first. Okay. This is where I made a grave error. So I have some cutting to do.
It's all right. We have just a super classy editor class act that can make this happen.
We do. And while he's doing that, in case you ever wanted a classy editor or whatever, you could join our podcast network and get him as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Boom.
Hell of a guy.
InfinityPodcastNetwork.com. Join the network.
See, that's just a good plug.
It's our tagline should be not a Ponzi scheme.
Not a Ponzi scheme. All right, here we go.
This guy's kind of cool. Dan Crenshaw.
Oh, come on, man.
Yo, hold on. You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie. I'm sorry. I know he lost his eye in war or whatever. Whatever. All right. Well, here's a Democrat, so I look fair. Give me that Cuomo guy. There he is.
You can cut that out. All right.
Yeah,
so
Cuomo. He looks like a.
There you go. So that was the clip, and obviously it was the quip of I know he lost his eye and whatever, and so he has an eye patch for those in the listening audience. And he lost his eye in combat. He actually learned how to shoot with the opposite hand and went back to combat after that. So this guy is the real deal. But he kind of put out a statement basically saying that, he tries not to offend and tries not to be offended. But he kind of took the stance of it just seemed a little untoward, right? And so I thought in the show of true class on all sides, they revisited this last Saturday. And so we're going to play, it's going to be a little bit lengthy, but we're going to play the full clip, and then it'll kind of lead us into our discussion this evening.
No, but I mean this from the bottom of my heart. It was a poor choice of words. The man is a war hero, and he deserves all the respect in the world. And if any good came of this, maybe it was that for one day the left and the right finally came together to agree on something. That I'm a dick.
You think?
'Cause, 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 'cause,
All right, and that's Dan Crenshaw coming into the shot.
Lieutenant Commander Dan Crenshaw, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for making a Republican look good.
You gotta stop saying that, man. You've been saying it all day. Please. Look, I just wanted to say, for people that don't know, the reason you're wearing an eye patch right now is that you lost your eye to an IED in Afghanistan during your 3rd combat tour. And I'm sorry.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate you saying that.
So we good?
We're good. Apology accepted.
Just keep breathing.
It sounds like my phone's ringing.
You gonna answer that?
No, and I was just going to let it ring because that's rude to answer. Let's just let it go to voicemail.
No, it's cool. Ariana Grande. Well, cool, man. Yeah.
But, oh, do you know her?
All right, so that's funny. All right. So last week I made a joke about a picture of you, and I feel like it would only be fair if you got me back and made fun of a picture of me. Does that sound okay?
I don't really need to do that.
No, come on. I deserve it.
All right, I'll do one.
Please. All right.
And now, first impressions with Lieutenant Commander Dan Crenshaw.
Thanks, Colin. This is Pete Davidson. He looks like if the meth from Breaking Bad was a person.
Not bad. So there, we're even. All right.
Hold on, well, one more. This is.
All right.
He looks like a troll doll with a tapeworm.
Yeah, man. All right, that's good. We should wrap this up.
Oh, hold on. No, this is fun. This is fun.
Cool.
He looks like Martin Short in the Santa Claus 3. By the way, one of these people was actually good on SNL.
No, you're right. No, you're not wrong.
Okay, but seriously, there's a lot of lessons to learn here. Not just that the left and right can still agree on some things, but also this: Americans can forgive one another. We can remember what brings us together as a country and still see the good in each other. This is Veterans Day weekend, which means that it's a good time for every American to connect with a veteran. Maybe say thanks for your service, but I would actually encourage you to say something else. Tell a veteran, never forget. When you say never forget to a veteran, you are implying that as an American, you are in it with them, not separated by some imaginary barrier between civilians and veterans, but connected together as grateful fellow Americans. We'll never forget the sacrifices made by veterans past and present, and never forget those we lost on 9/11, heroes like Pete's father. So I'll just say, Pete, never forget.
Never forget. And that is for both of us.
Commander Dan Crenshaw and Pete Davidson. Weekend update. I'm Colin Jost.
I'm Michael Chang.
All right. So, and you could hear off mic Pete Davidson saying, "You're a good man," to him. Pete did not know that Dan was going to reference his father in 9/11. Pete did lose his dad in 9/11. And so that's obviously a very powerful clip, I think, of forgiveness and such like that. But the main reason that we wanted to talk about this is comedy. So when does comedy go too far? And does comedy have I don't know what the word I'm looking for. Does comedy have a duty to decency? I guess is the word. So we're gonna kind of just open up and talk about that because we all three here are big fans of comedy, but we've also seen and we've also experienced comedy that's gone a little bit too far. There's stuff that has made the cutting room floor on our podcast because it went a little bit too far, comedy-wise. So it's not to say that it wasn't funny. It's just that it didn't meet the kind of the standards of what we wanted to put out there. So comedy, when is too far too far? Rob, you want to start?
Sure. So comedy is a very subjective thing. So I don't, ever place limits on saying, well, this is too far, or this wasn't too far. Holding up, let's take Pete Davidson for a minute. So holding up a picture of Lieutenant Commander Dan Crenshaw and saying this guy looks like a villain in a porno film, if you don't know how he got that eye patch, funny joke. It's I think it's pretty funny. However, once you learn, and then once Pete extends the joke and says he lost his eye in a war or whatever, and just dismisses how it happened, for me, that's what turns it into something that's no longer funny. That's me, though. So I think comedy is very much subjective. I'll give you another example. So Dave Chappelle is my all-time favorite comedian. Dave Chappelle has a couple of bits that I don't think are funny because they deal with abortion. But that's me. I can't get online and say this is objectively unfunny for everyone, because obviously that would be wrong. I can't tell someone what's funny and what is not. So it is a difficult line to draw for anyone because you have people on all sides. Pete Davidson, during a roast on Comedy Central, made fun of the fact that his dad died in 9/11, and many other comics on the stage made fun of that fact as well. And everyone on that stage was fine with it. So in that environment, it was okay. But for someone to get up on SNL and say that cold without Davidson being around, I think many people would say, well, that's not funny. So a lot of it is environment. A lot of it is who understands who you're making a joke about. And then it's a very blurred line for me to say this is funny and unfunny for everybody.
For me, especially in this specific instance, and I think you had really good points, Rob, and I would tend to agree. But I think what made it especially an interesting case in this situation was because he was pulling out a list of politicians, and they were all, except one, Republicans. And he even threw on at the end, the very next one was, I'll throw in a Democrat in there so it looks like I'm fair or something. And
right.
And so I agree with you. I think the roast is a perfect example because we've all seen the roast where it's like, ooh, was that too far? But everyone's laughing and having a good time. And like, frankly, like even in this room between the three of us, we'll say stuff about each other that we would never just say about a random stranger, on the street. And so there's something to be said about the camaraderie that show is wildly different with Dan Crenshaw on it, or in on the joke, so to speak, than just outside of that with no context. And then because they were political people, it just came off as ad hominem attacks and not even really humor. Like all of them were kind of like I can kind of see the humor, but like it's coming from a place of a political perspective, and these are just coming off as ad hominems and not even really an attempt at humor. And so I think context is a huge thing.
Yeah, and so I think context, I think audience, we kind of spoke to that. In general, so I'm going to speak in general. In general, comedy almost has a duty to push the boundaries. Because comedy, especially when you get into parody and some of the other comedy genres that I really love and appreciate, it's designed to make you go, and think about your preconceived notions and work through that with laughter. And so a lot of comedy comes from a place of pain.
Yeah. And
working through that. That's why, we're always shocked when a comedian commits suicide. But a lot of that is, we laugh to keep from crying. And so, a lot of that comes from that place. And so comedy always has to naturally stretch those barriers. And I think that political correctness and our comedy don't mix, and so we should always be wary of that. But I think audience plays a part in that. Saturday Night Live is more for a mainstream audience. It's not amateur night at the comedy club or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like, or even like, on a cruise ship, some comedian speaking, like, I'm not going to a comedy club, it's a different audience. It's more broad. And so I think that your meter on that needs to be a little more broad and understanding. I think my biggest issue, honestly, with the joke was I didn't find it funny. And I was like, man, you've been writing this joke for a week. And that's the best you can come up with is, a hitman in a porn movie. I mean, first of all, I'm like, no wonder that Ariana Grande broke up with him if that's the kind of porn that he's watching. It's not just like she caught him with porn on his computer. She's like, you're watching hitman porn? This engagement is off. I mean, that was my biggest issue is like you wrote this joke for a week. I didn't even mind necessarily was poking fun at him because he had an eye patch or whatever. It was like you literally were writing this joke for a week, and that's the best you could come up with. You were at that point you were just looking and grasping at something to make fun of a congressional candidate who happens to be wearing an eye patch. What I'm saying? So it wasn't like a first impression thing. It was more of like, you're grasping at straws. And I think that if the joke was legitimately funny and he hadn't made that quip about, there's a couple things, right? So the host, goes, oh, come on, man. As soon as the thing comes up. So something's coming, right? And almost as if they had rehearsed this with like 3 other pictures, and this one came up, and he's like, "Oh, you're going with this one," and then so you know what I'm saying. So right there, you're like, and then the joke wasn't that funny, and then the little quip at the end. Yeah, I know he lost his eye in combat or whatever. Like, just like whatever, And I just think it was those mixed. It just left a bad taste. It wasn't a matter of funny. And I'm willing to laugh at people on our side of the aisle all the time. And but there's a big difference. There's a big difference in John McCain making fun of the fact that he can't lift his hands over his head when he was alive, and he would make those jokes. And if you ever listen to John McCain in a semi-closed setting when there wasn't a lot of press around, he is funny and he's self-deprecating, and it's hilarious. And he's making jokes that are pushing the boundaries, but they're self-deprecating. It's about himself, and so he can make jokes about the Hanoi Hilton. I cannot, right? And there's this veteran comedian who was burned up in an IED attack, and he has basically scars all over his body from third-degree burns, and he's deformed. And he's a comedian, and his comedy bit is all about fire and being roasted like a marshmallow and that kind of stuff. And it's like you're like, man, this is really funny. But I feel bad for laughing. But because he's telling the joke, like it's almost permission to be able to laugh. But you know what? He's working through his pain. You could tell that. But so it's just a matter of audience and kind of expectations. But I think comedy should always be allowed to push the barrier. But as long as it's funny. And my biggest thing about that joke was it wasn't really that funny. I even like chuckle at all about it. I was like, okay. Like, I thought the next joke about Cuomo was actually more fun, probably the funniest of that set, and had nothing to do with the fact that Cuomo was a Democrat. I thought it was a funnier joke. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole comedy realm.
Yeah. So you hit on a couple things, and I think we need to be careful that I think we need to understand, like you said, Nathan, that the whole purpose of comedy is push the boundaries. But I think that those boundaries are contextual to the audience, and I'll come back to that. But we need to be careful, especially in our culture right now, that we don't allow political correctness or these type of minor offenses or microaggressions or whatever you want to call them to affect the whole purpose of comedy. And so I am probably going to err on the side of the comedian 9 times out of 10 in the proper context. And so what I mean by that, Rob, you mentioned Dave Chappelle. You know, we can think of others, but there's a context there that if you're going to a Dave Chappelle show or you're watching a Dave Chappelle special on Netflix, like, you know what you're getting yourself into. And so there's a difference between that, and it's also so in that it's self-selecting. The people that have that kind of tolerance for a certain type of humor are going to seek it out, and they're going to want to have that kind of humor. There's a little bit less of that when it is on cable, or when it is on other mediums, or where there's a broader audience. So it's a tough line, I think, to balance, because I don't want comedy to be shut down by some kind of politically correct mantra, but at the same time, you have to know your audience. And I think of like a Christian comic that typically let's say John Crist. John Crist is really funny Christian comedian. He tends to preach he tends to speak and started off in churches and speaking to church crowds. All right, so there's a difference in his pushing the boundaries, right? Pushing the boundaries for him is going to be a lot different than pushing the boundaries for Dave Chappelle. And those two things aren't any less comedic, and they're not any less, it's not any less pushing the boundaries. But if John Crist comes out there in a church and he just says, "Oh, just for the heck of it, I'm going to drop an F-bomb," just to push the boundaries, it's like, okay, it's pushing the boundaries, but number one, it's not funny in that context, and it's pushing the boundaries outside of the realm of possibility within that context.
Right. Well, and to that, like, John Crist was forced to apologize because they did a fantasy football draft for pastors, and he was forced to pull that, and it was like really benign stuff. I mean, Christians are horrible at comedy, as far as like having a sense of humor. Let's just be upfront about that. And it's true. And so that you're right. That boundary is extremely different. But to the point, though, right? So it's okay to say something offends me. It's a whole nother thing to say that person deserves to lose their job and never work again because they offended me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this context, right? Like, Pete Davidson was called out for it, and I'm okay with him being called out for it. But nobody was calling for, well, I shouldn't say nobody. I'm sure there was somebody. But nobody, especially Dan Crenshaw, wasn't saying, hey, he deserves to get fired over this. It was just a matter of apologize. He apologized. Boom. Done. Okay. I found the line. Comedians are always trying to find the line. I found the line. I crossed it. I'm sorry. Boom. It's done. It's over with. But to me, political correctness is you need to be ostracized for crossing the line.
Well, when you talk about John Crist, like, that's a good example. When he got heat for that pastor video, he made a huge mistake in apologizing. There was nothing to apologize for.
Especially since he knew the pastors he was making fun of. Like, he had relationships with them. Like, yeah, right. Absolutely.
It made him look weak, and it made him. It really, in my opinion, impacted his just as, I guess, his overall stature as a comedian. But one thing that you guys have been talking about is this sort of evolution of comedy. And we've seen, it's interesting as you look at eras, like if you go by decades, how things progress and how people started to push the line. Like you go from like 50s, 60s slapstick Red Skelton bits to like Dangerfield, Kinnison, and Carlin. And then they evolve into like Chappelle, Eddie Murphy, and Chris Rock, pushing the envelope even further. And now what was interesting is in the early 2000s, after Murphy and Rock really blew up, there was sort of a subsection, a subcult of comedy that came out in this blue collar era. And that sparked a lot of different comedians' careers, not just the four main guys who did it. And then now, obviously, comedy is multifaceted as far as genres and forms, but then you have people that, one of these guys might be a little less known, but Joey Diaz is a frequent flyer on Joe Rogan's show, and he's a long-form comedian, and he is, by the people that know him, he's regaled as the greatest comedian of all time because of the stories that he tells and how he tells them and how honest he is. And it's just interesting to see the progression of comedy and what people were comfortable with 30, 40 years ago, and now what we think is top shelf comedy now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always going to evolve as we evolve. But like I said, they're always at the forefront of pushing those boundaries and talking about things that, well, let's be honest, and we all do this. I shouldn't say we all. Like, I do this all the time. To break the tension, I'll tell a joke. And 99 times out of 100, it's a pretty inappropriate joke for the time. But it makes people laugh and it breaks the tension. And I've been doing this my whole entire life. Like, oh, okay, like let's if there's an elephant in the room, I'll point it out with a joke, and that's fine. You know, and it makes family gatherings really interesting around the Martin household, and also gets me a lot of side eye from my mom, and gets a lot of secret laughter from my father.
Yeah, that's what makes it interesting, though.
My dad loves it, and I know he loves it. But the fact that he can't love it because he'll get in trouble with my mom, it just makes it all the better. But it's, I don't know, it's a release, and you know, I think that some people just need to pull the sticks out of their butts when it comes to a lot of this, and just let stuff roll off. Like, it's okay to laugh. If it's an inappropriate joke, sometimes it's okay to laugh because you're releasing, and it's okay to release. And you know, we're in a country right now that just needs a lot of laughter, to be honest with you, and we need that type of release. We have suicides at an astronomical rate at all levels, and I think to some degree, and it's not all political correctness, okay, but to some degree, the fact that we can't come together as a nation and just laugh at ourselves some more, I think is a part of that. And I know for me, struggling with depression, or struggling with self-doubt and stuff like that throughout my whole entire life, and struggling with trauma, or struggling with just crap, laughter is that release that keeps me grounded and sane. And I think that's honestly, I think laughter honestly is a gift from God. And I think that it is sometimes the best medicine. And, you know, throughout all time periods, it didn't matter if we were in World War II. It didn't matter if we were World War I. It didn't matter. All these different areas, we had the ability to laugh, and sometimes laugh at ourselves. And I think it was cathartic. And I think that the more we shut that off, the more that we push good comedy to the edges of our society, the less healthier that we become. And that's why, you know, I'm going to crack inappropriate jokes on here sometimes. And I'm going to make people cringe a little bit. But at the same time, there's going to be somebody out there in the listening audience that laughs and chuckles, and maybe that was the first time that they were able to laugh that week because they lost their mom or dad. Or maybe that was the first time they were able to laugh in the last month because they lost a child. And it's like you don't know kind of what position and place that people come from, and so if you want to shut that out, if you are so not in need of having that catharsis to where you want to rob other people of that, I think you need to reevaluate yourself. And I think that what Lieutenant Commander Crenshaw said is very apropos. I think that we need to try not to offend, but at the same time, we need to work really hard to not be offended. And this outrage culture is really going to kill us in the end if we just embrace that cycle.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I mean, one of my frustrations too, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, and I don't know, but is the, and I think this goes back to context as well, is politics in comedy, especially on TV, especially in late night. I think that even in this SNL bit. I think that was part of it, but it's become so politicized. Late night has become so politicized that I think it really alienates people, and it really, I think, gets away from what you're talking about, Nathan, and it gets away from what its purpose is. And that's not to say never say anything political, like you make a good joke about President Bush, I'll laugh. You make a good joke about President Obama, I'll probably laugh. And heaven knows we've had plenty of laughs about President Trump on this podcast. So it's not one side or the other, but there comes a point where, and I mentioned this earlier with this SNL bit, is there comes a point where, all right, is this humor, or is it just an ad hominem? Is it just a personal attack, kind of clothed in humor or disguised as humor? And we see that so much, and it's like I can't stomach most late night shows anymore. It's like, and then there's entire monologues where there's not a single joke, and it's just a political monologue. I'm looking at you, Jimmy Kimmel, and it's like, what are we doing here? Like, is this a platform to espouse your political views, or is it a platform to make people laugh and have a good time? And I wonder if we haven't also lost our way as it relates to that.
Well, and as an aside from that, I think there's another dynamic to this too. So, to bring it back to kind of some scriptural stuff, the Bible clearly tells us to speak the truth in love, and I think that's an important component of both. And I'll get around how this kind of applies to comedy, but Ben Shapiro, right? He's very fond of saying facts don't care about your feelings. But there is a big difference between facts not caring about your feelings and me using facts to hurt your feelings.
Right.
There's a big difference there. And I think we saw it this week with President Trump about the wildfires in California. So was he factually accurate in a lot of the mismanagement at the California Forest Department? Yes, he was factually accurate. Okay, so do facts care about your feelings? No, but there's a difference between speaking truth and speaking truth in love. And there's also a difference in just speaking love and not having the truth. And you have to have both sides of those coins. And so I think that comedy has the same thing. There's a way to present stuff to where laughter is the best medicine, but we also know that there's incredible power in the tongue that could hurt. And so, are you really trying to offend? Are you deliberately trying to offend, or are you trying there's there's a difference between ripping off a Band-Aid and ripping off a scab. And if comedy's done right, it's just going to rip off the Band-Aid, promote healing. If comedy's done wrong, though, it's just reopening wounds and ripping off scabs. All right, Rob.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Trump's comment about the forest fires was something that was very frustrating because a lot of that area in California, he and the federal government has actual control over. So if he wants to make leaps and try and fix things, then he can do that. I thought that was a very careless, ridiculous thing to say, and it was. It's hard to rank the things that he has said that are very irritating, but that's right up there, especially in the midst of people losing their lives. Almost 50 people have died as a cause of these fires. And for him to just start throwing daggers at the Democrats and saying it's because the forest management is so poor, it's like, well, a lot of that's federal controlled too. So it's not, even if it is the division of the fire or the forest area that is controlled by Democrats, okay. Majority of it's federal anyhow. But my final thoughts on the comedy thing is, I again can't tell people what's funny and what's not. I can tell you what I think is funny, and I can justify why I think that's the case. For you, what you have to decide if you're listening and you don't know a line. Like, one thing I'm looking at now is these YouTube comments on like Pete Davidson and Crenshaw. And people are saying, well, it's funny how Republicans are offended over this, but no one was upset when McCain was made fun of by Trump about being a quote-unquote war hero or a bad war hero because he got captured. Try to avoid doing that. Try to avoid doing compare and contrast. Deal with the actual bit at hand, because generalizing and saying that no one was upset over that is demonstrably wrong. A lot of Republicans were upset over that.
Right, but including the three of us on this podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I have veteran friends who are solid Trump supporters, even in, a couple of which are in the current administration. And one thing that really ticked them off were those comments.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's easy. It's easy for people to say, well, no one on the right cared about this. Why do they care about this? That's a careless thing to say because it's a gross generalization. Deal with what's at hand here. Was what Davidson said funny? Out of context? If it wasn't for the he lost his eye in war, I could see why people can think that's funny. In its entire context, probably not. I don't think it is. But you have to deal with the bit that's in front of you. Don't compare and contrast. Don't gross generalize. And like Crenshaw, now Congressman-elect Crenshaw said, don't do your best, not to offend people, to a reasonable degree, but just really try not to be offended. It's a huge thing. People are blown out of proportion about every small thing. And it's ridiculous to see the level of which people on both sides get outraged over the dumbest stuff.
Yeah, what can you control?
Right.
What can you control? At the end of the day, you can only control your actions and your reaction to those things that are happening in your life. So, don't be a victim. Don't be offended at every little thing. And that is, by the way, that's a bipartisan thing. That is just as much on the right as it is on the left. It's almost like people are looking for reasons to be offended or outraged, to match the intensity of the outrage that happened 2 days ago. So,
yep, 100%.
All right, Rob, we have some sponsors. And we have some great people that have partnered with us so that we can sit down in our comfy chairs and sit behind a microphone and bloviate for hours on end. So tell us a little bit about them. Who's helping make the magic happen this week?
So the magic maker for money and power this week is Hover.com. So, as we've said many times on the show, we're not a big fan of pimping stuff that we don't use or believe in or support. And Hover is something, for me in my personal life, helped me start my next company that's coming in January. It helped us a lot get this show off the ground. The clean style, super customer service. It's just a great company overall. They are sponsoring the show. They're giving listeners 10% off domain services, email services, transfer services, anything on the website, hover.com, that you can get your hands on. 10% off, hover.com/moneyandpower. And I got to say, comparing, I'm not going to drop names of other domain providers, but the ease, I told my wife, I said, it's like the Apple of domain providers, just because it's so clean and precise. It's, no pop-up add-ons for, 256 encryption or site security lock. It's all included. One fee, one domain, one transfer. Everything you need is in that one price, and that's a big win for us. So hover.com/moneyandpower for 10% off. I highly recommend it. I know these guys do too.
Yeah, and we talked about the Infinity Podcast Network, and for those that are coming into the Infinity Podcast Network, the first thing we do is we want to set up a website. We want to set up different services, and that is our preferred place that we send people to first. And we did before they were a sponsor, but we're really glad to have them on board because obviously, they help make the magic happen for our websites, but they also help make the magic happen for you guys in podcast land. So please join us in supporting them. Hover.com/moneyandpower for 10% off. All right, guys, that was good. I enjoyed that. Do we have any feedback, Jeremiah?
Yeah, so we got a couple pieces of feedback. Just a reminder, everyone can follow us at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We got some fun stuff happening there. I try and do a little bit different on each of the platforms. On Instagram, I've been posting some videos and some commentary quotes from different episodes, and just kind of funny little bits that I've been able to pull. So definitely check that out on Instagram at Money Power Pod. We've already mentioned this once, but you can join our Facebook group at moneypowerpod.com/group, and that will forward to our discussion group. We'd love to have you there. And so in our discussion group, we got a couple questions or a couple comments, just a couple things I wanted to point out. Kevin Small sent us a link, and he said this should be the next Money and Power giveaway, and it was a link to MAGA building blocks for sale, encourages kiddos to build the wall. So it's basically knockoff Legos with an opportunity to quote unquote build the wall. MAGA building blocks. So yeah. So hey, you never know if you we talked about doing a giveaway for followers and subscribers on YouTube, and you can go to moneypowerpod.com/YouTube to subscribe there. We'd love to have you, but I don't know, maybe that'll be one of our next giveaways is knockoff Legos. Hashtag build the wall.
And so this is where I'm going to step in. I disagree. All right. If we're going to give away blocks, we're going to give away good quality blocks. We're going to give away Legos. We're not going to go with the cheap knockoffs, the ones that don't have the interlinking block system and they just topple over. No, sir. We believe in quality on this podcast, and we believe in quality for you out there. So we might print out a sticker that says build a wall or something kitschy and throw it on an actual Lego box. But no. We do things right in the Infinity Podcast Network.
So this is a complete rabbit trail, but I was listening to this podcast, and it was a Mac and tech podcast, and so kind of more on the nerdy side of hosts. But they were having that. There's one host that always calls it singular Lego because the company is Lego, and so it's like. So I was playing with Lego the other day, and I got a bunch of Lego for Christmas, and I'm just like, it's so awkward. Quit saying that, like, even if it's not correct, like, but it's like we wouldn't do that for any other company.
Yeah, we do. Well, sorta. So if you go to what's the grocery store you go to that's over by Starbucks?
Meijer,
but a lot of people call it Myers. Right, so we plural stuff like that all the time. A lot of people say they're going to.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. We don't create those distinctions for other things. So that's a little bit different because that's just wrong. It's not Myers, it's Meijer. But if you were talking about a bunch of Meijer stores, you wouldn't say Meijer in the plural. You would say,
right.
There's Meijers all over the state,
or Kroger's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just frustrating, and it's like just a complete rabbit trail. But
or whatever they have in Michigan. I don't know.
Fun fact: I used to work at Kmart. That was my first job, and all the old ladies used to write Kmarts on the check, and I would make them write a new check. So they're not going to accept that. It needs to be Kmart.
You made a lot of friends.
It's a monster.
All right.
I was 16. I was a terrible person.
All right, we got another bit of feedback. But I have a feeling that that's going to make its way into parting shots. So we're going to leave that one. And so without further ado, you can reach out to us, Money Power Pod, on all the socials, moneypowerpod.com/group. We would love to have you in the discussion group. And now is time for the part of the show that we just start winding down or maybe ramping up. Parting shots. All right, Rob.
Yeah, so one of the pieces of feedback that we got in the group this week was it was really built upon something that happened earlier, which was Stan Lee passed away. So Stan Lee obviously is one of the co-creators of several beloved Marvel characters, and 95 years old. And what was interesting about Stan Lee is that even at 95, he was working as hard as he did for that brand as he was when he was 20, 25, working towards being an artist, and he never stopped. He never took a break. Even his wife said it's like he's a kid. He's still working, still doing film, still creating stories, still doing 1 billion Comic-Con appearances. One of the jokes I made earlier on this show was someone had said that they met Stan Lee, and I said it's more rare to meet the janitor at the Comic-Con than it is to meet Stan Lee, just because he's so present and he loves the fans. So that's a big loss in the comic community. I'm a big Marvel fan, even though I read a lot of DC. Marvel's always been my go-to comics. And it's a big loss. It's sad, but in a way, it's great that he had 95 years to contribute to that brand, and that his legacy is going to live on far longer than he was alive, which is great. So yeah, it's a big hit.
One of the videos that I saw, kind of in memoriam type videos going around, was a quote where he said that, people ask him if he's going to retire, and he says most people retire so that they can do all of the things that they've always wanted to do, and he has been doing all the things that he's ever wanted to do for many years. So there's no point in retiring, and I just thought that's such a great way to live life. Like, and honestly, and this goes into, money and finances a bit, but I think my thought has always been the way that we do kind of stereotypically do retirement is broken, and so I love the idea of like I'm not just going to retire and stop adding value to my community and to my family and to the world. I'm going to, even in retirement, whatever that means, continue to be an active member in this thing we call life. And I love that mentality.
Yeah, one of my favorite people in the world, Paul Hansen from Norfolk, Nebraska. Shout out to Paul. But I always used to ask him. So I was always hang out as a young kid, 11, 12, 13, 14. I would always hang out at his transmission shop. He had a transmission shop in his garage. And I thought that he was like the oldest person in the world because he was in his like 40s or something at the time. But I used to always joke. I was like, hey, you're still working. Like, when are you going to retire? And he said, well, I'll tell you, I'll make a deal with you. You show me in the Bible where it says that I can retire, and then I'll retire. And I never was able to find it, but it really stuck with me. And his whole point, he didn't just stop there, but his whole point was, we're not designed, we're not made to just retire. We're created for a purpose, and our purpose doesn't have an expiration date until God decides to take us home. And I think that is a valuable lesson that's always stuck with me.
Yeah. As it relates to Stan Lee, it's going to be a really sad day when we get to the end of a Marvel movie and it says, in loving memory of Stan Lee, and then you look back and it's like, oh, wait a second, this was his first film that, he didn't have a cameo in it.
Well, it'll be a while before we get that because I think
Right.
he's done 5 cameo. Like he was doing cameos, he does them all in one day or whatever. And so I think the next 5 films have cameos of him in there.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. But yeah, it's going to be.
No, I commented that on one of my friends' posts on Facebook, and I said, like, I wonder how many films that would actually be because so many of them are already in production. Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see.
I think definitely all of next year's are already done.
Yeah. Do you guys have an all-time favorite Stan Lee creation?
Yeah, I'd definitely say Batman.
Nice. Good job. As Bob Kane rises from the grave and throat punches you.
Super troll move right there. Yeah, it's like Boba Fett, man.
Nice. I like Luke. Luke's my man.
Jeez, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, so I'll give you mine. Mine is Hawkeye. So Hawkeye in the comics, and then the new gen Hawkeye that they relaunched in 2013, I think. It's all been good. Hawkeye always had a stupid looking costume, but it was always a great character. And then my favorite, second favorite's probably Doctor Strange.
Yeah, Doctor Strange is a good one.
So kind of outside of the traditional mold. I mean, obviously there's so many good ones, but I'd say probably especially in recent iterations, I'd probably say Daredevil. I really enjoy the arc of that character, and yeah, almost like the am I a hero? Am I an anti-hero? Kind of. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good one.
Daredevil is definitely
definitely a hero.
No, it's definitely up there. He stole mine.
No, really?
I'm trying to. Well, so there's a lot of Marvel characters that weren't created specifically by Stan Lee. So I'm trying to make sure that I don't really go troll on someone.
While you're thinking, he created I think the final tally that I read in Time was 362 characters created or co-created.
Yeah. So I'm
Yes.
trying to think. Was Wolverine him?
No.
No. Okay. So
No.
that's,
Wolverine, it's
He's not on this list on Wikipedia, and we all know that Wikipedia is 100%
Yeah.
accurate. So
Stan
and
Lee
that-
was responsible for the X-Men.
right,
But
yes,
But yeah, he didn't create Wolverine.
what about Nightcrawler? So one of my favorite comic book scenes is when the Wolverine accepts Christ.
Yeah.
That's very powerful. But Daredevil, the reason that Daredevil's on my list is because obviously the Roman Catholic traditions there, and the strong faith basis. I thought that for me, from an ethical standpoint, I thought that character is probably one of my favorites for what that presents. It's not your typical, it's comics, but as philosophy. Does that make sense? So I'm a fan more of that, and I think that that's something that Stan Lee brought to the genre, is more of that versus, his characters could be deep. They didn't have to be cartoony.
Yeah, and that's why I think like the one of his best all-time franchises is Spider-Man, because that's a character that we've seen 3 or 4 different animation and film franchises based around it, and it's got such a rich story the way that he wrote it. You can placate on the preamble to the story where Peter Parker's parents left him with his aunt, or you can play on the postscript after his Uncle Ben dies. It's just he wrote characters like you write novels, and it's a rarity.
Exactly. Where his characters had depth, I guess, is what I'm trying
Absolutely.
to go for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's going to be a loss, and I certainly hope I guess I don't know how much editorial guidance he had over the Marvel the MCU. In
Next to none.
Yeah, so I guess the concerns of him being gone and then it going down the tubes is probably not a big concern.
Not a worry. No.
So
No, because he set such a rich tapestry. It's not going to be a problem. They have so much good source material to pull from.
His least favorite cameo was in Deadpool, being in the strip club. I did see that.
Wow.
So, and the reason he gave was because there was this jackwagon was throwing nickels around.
Yeah, I could see that. I will say my favorite cameo of Stan Lee, I think it was in Avengers Age of Ultron, when they're celebrating. I don't know what they're celebrating, but Stan Lee is there with a bunch of vets, and Thor has this super liquor from Asgard, and he's like, I was in the beaches of Normandy, I can take this, and he takes like a little sip, and then they do a cut scene, and he's trashed, and he's like, Excelsior, and they're carrying him away. It's just such a great scene.
It is. That is good.
Are we still in news bits? Do we need to?
No, we're not still in news bits, Jeremiah. Catch up. We're going by the show notes here. So
I'm monopolizing our time with Stan Lee.
no, listen. This is what the people wanted. They asked us.
Yep.
Tony said, "Can you discuss the cultural impact?" And that is what we're doing. All right, Jeremiah, what's your parting shot?
So, I have been vilified at times for taking too long and parting shots, or taking too long in feedback or whatever. So I'm just going to keep this short, unlike our friend Robert over here. And my parting shot is simply this. I'm really excited about the future. really am. There's a lot of things in the works, and with the network, with family, with work, with just a lot of things going on, and I'm just content, but also just really excited for the future, and I'm just ready to take it on head on. So that's my parting shot.
It's a good parting shot, and I think 2019 is going to be an awesome year. So we got some awesome stuff coming up. We have our conference coming up in February, our first conference, and we have possibility of 3 or 4 more conferences next year coming to a place near you. It's going to be exciting. We're going to be in Mansfield, Ohio in February, and we're going to be doing some videography there. We're going to have official sponsors. It's going to be, I don't know. It's going to be crazy.
Legit.
Yeah. And we're also going to do a live podcast, which very well could get us into trouble. So we'll have a lot of practice between now and then. So hopefully we'll keep the quips down. Although I think it will help. We'll be in a church. So
yeah. We'll see.
Will
Jeremiah gets a little randy sometimes, so we'll see how that goes.
He'll be like, I have these $4 in nickels. Like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
Does it go? Do I just throw it at the usher? Do I throw it on the stage and they collect it on the stage? I don't know what's.
Listen, comedy is all about pushing the boundaries, and so I'm just going to be dropping F-bombs, and everyone will be laughing. I promise.
I straight up thought you were going to say comedy is all about pushing the boundaries, so that's why I'm throwing quarters this time.
No, we both know Jeremiah. He's way too cheap for that.
Yeah.
He's not throwing quarters. What are you talking about?
Listen, I said I was excited about the future. I didn't say that I'd won the lottery. Come on now.
Maybe dimes in 2020. We'll see.
But if you do have, if you would like to join us in February, you can go to moneypowerpod.com/tickets. Right?
Yep.
All right. I just want to make sure I got the plural, the plural, non-plural thing always gets me. Although Jeremiah knows by now, he just puts both in, so it doesn't matter what I say. It's okay.
It's moneypowerpod.com/Lego.
Yes. All right. So my parting shot. I had a big parting shot, but it's been so long, so I don't really remember that. My parting shot, though, is I don't remember what I was going to talk about. This Sunday was Veterans Day, and it was the 100-year anniversary of when World War I ended.
Yeah.
And Rob, I'm going to give you some time. Can you look up that clip of the end of World War I? Do you know what I'm talking about on Facebook?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. If you can look that up, I'll talk a little bit. If you can cue that up, we'll play that because it's very powerful, I think. But it was Veterans Day. Jeremiah and I have served. My grandpa has served. My uncle, my aunt. I have cousins. I have other uncles. Our family has a history of service to this country. Like a lot of your families do. And so I just want to say Happy Veterans Day. But it is the 100-year anniversary of the end of World War I. It was the war to end all wars. And, of course, we know that is not accurate, even to this day. But do remember those who fought to protect our freedoms. We are losing the greatest generation at a record clip, to the point that, probably in the next little bit we're not going to have any more with us. And so if you have somebody in your family that is an older vet, so grandpa, great-grandpa, someone who was in World War II, Korean War, talk to them. Talk to them about their service. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the history of their service, but just talk to them about what that service meant to them at that time and what it means today. And I think that you'll be kind of surprised by the answer, but also refreshed from the answer. And I think that if a lot more of us did that, if a lot more of us grounded ourselves to our history more, I think that we would be all better off. I know that we would all be better off as a country. But when we think that the world history began 1992 or 93, or that becomes problematic, and that's not when world history began. And there's a lot of context that we lose if we don't talk and communicate and try to better understand our past. And so, happy Veterans Day. And do you have that clip up, Rob?
I do.
All right. So what you're going to hear, and then I'll go ahead and we'll exit. But what you are going to hear is the end of World War I. It is a recording from a battlefield, and you're going to hear about a minute. I think it starts at like 10:59. And of course, it was at the 11th hour that the treaty was. And then all of a sudden, you'll hear the guns go silent. That will be 11 o'clock. So the artillery was going all the way up until 11 o'clock. So you'll hear it, and it's almost eerie in the silence. But think about being in a trench in World War I, and this is what you hear.
Wow.
Stunning. All right. Happy Veterans Day. For Jeremiah Martin, for Rob Johnson, as always, I am your adorable host, Nathan Martin, saying good night and good luck.
I got the money and the power. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on? Really ain't nothing, I could drop that. Wake up in the morning, make it all back. It's nothing to get it poppin', wanna roll up and away, here we go. Now Martin had a dream, I've been dreaming about gold. Tell him I just wanna shine.